E-commerce is amazing, right? You can start from scratch and scale it relatively quickly. However, one of the misconceptions that I see quite frequently is that e-commerce is so simple and you can take all the profits directly out of the business. Now, do not get me wrong here. You can make a lot of money and a lot of profit doing e-commerce, and you can realize some of those profits and take them out yourself. The thing here is that a lot of people don't realize is as you're scaling, right? Cash flow becomes really the main metric that you need to focus on and the main challenge to scale your business over the long term, assuming that you're growing, right? So what do I mean by that? For example, if you look up on the screen, you'll see 3 different months in an example e-commerce business, okay? Month one right here, you're pulling $12,000 in revenue, but your cost of goods, your expenses are $8,000, which means your net profit is $4,000. Now, what a lot of people think is that it's pretty, black and white, right? It's linear. You made $4,000 that month because your revenue was $12,000, your cost of goods was $8,000, therefore you kept $4,000 in profit. However, what a lot of people don't realize is you don't get paid that money like right away, right? Technically, a lot of times you have to wait for the item to be delivered, and then depending on the platform that you're selling on, wait for the payout to actually happen and hit your bank account, right? So typically it can be like a week or sometimes even 2 weeks potentially until you get paid after that transaction. So you have to float those weeks. On top of that, if your business is scaling, which means you're getting more sales and your revenue is increasing, your cost of goods and the expenses that you're paying out also increase with that. And so you need to remember that as a whole. So for example, in the month one, you pulled in $12,000 revenue. You had $8,000 cost of goods, therefore your net profit was $4,000. You technically, in most cases, if your business is scaling, do not get to keep all of that $4,000. Typically, a lot of it will go back into the business, into future sales and future cost of goods, right? So if your business is scaling here, in this case, it's $4,000 increments. So as an example, we'll say month two, you made $16,000 in revenue. Your cost of goods went up a little bit to $9,500. Now you're spending $9,500 in that month. You might not necessarily be making that $4,000, but now you're not spending $8,000 the next month. You're spending $1,500 more. In a perfect world, you'd only net about $2,500 of that $4,000 profit because you had to put more money back into more orders because your business is scaling, right? And that's just on a small scale. So that's something that you need to keep in mind, okay? Now, obviously, there's different ways to approach it. You can use credit cards, you can leverage debt, and that's something that you should be very, very careful with if you are going that route. So I've talked about other cashback credit cards that I recommend in other videos. If you're drop shipping using Amazon as a supplier, get the Amazon cashback card. Amazon store card is like 5% cash back. You're spending money on those stores anyway, you might as well do that. Same thing with Walmart, 5% cash back. Typically, a lot of stores will have a 5% cash back card. The Discover It card is a great one for beginners because pretty much anyone can get started with that, apply and get accepted for that card. And it does have some decent cashback privileges. You should also be using cashback portals like Rakuten and Honey and stuff like that. But all things considered, like just to keep it simplistic, you won't realize a lot of the profit if your business is scaling, but that's a good thing, right? There will be a time where your business either stays relatively steady at those numbers or maybe goes up and down for a month or two. And those are the times you'll be able to pull money out of your business and actually realize a lot of the profit. But if you are scaling your business and your revenue is going up, your cost of goods is also going up with that. And you need to keep that in mind because you're going to need to reinvest a lot of the profit back into future orders to continue to make that money, right? Because especially in e-commerce, you need to spend money to make money. You're spending money on physical products. It's not like everything you're getting is 100% profit, right? So for example, in this next one for month three, you make $20,000. Well, now you have to spend $12,000 roughly. So your net profit is all the way up at $8,000 now. But again, you had to spend 12 grand to actually get that, right? So if your business is scaling, I want to hit this home. You're spending more money on cost of goods. Yes, you're netting more profit, but you might not realize that profit right away. And that's what a lot of people won't tell you. And that's what a lot of people don't necessarily recognize, okay? Now, the next two examples, there are situations, obviously. It's a good thing if your business is scaling, right? You want to keep reinvesting that profit back into the business to continue to scale it so you can realize a lot of that profit in the future. But for example, if you're doing more like an e-commerce business that's staying steady or even going up and down, then it's going to be a little bit different and you're going to be able to actually take more of that profit out of the business. So it really depends on your situation. So for these two examples, for this first example, let's say that your profit stays or your revenue stays pretty steady at like 12,000 and then 12,000 and then 12,500, right? Well, in this case, your cost of goods is going to stay pretty steady. So you're going to be able to pull out a lot more of the profit in the business because your cost of goods for those next months are coming up is not increasing, and therefore you won't have to continuously spend more money, so you'll be able to bank more of that profit, right? In this example, it's going up and down, which is typical in an e-commerce business. You're not going to be always scaling. You're not going to be like, always going down or even staying steady. Typically, it's going to be like a roller coaster, even if it is somewhat steady. So this is typically what you'll see depending on if your numbers are a little bit lower or a little bit higher. So for example, let's say month one, you make 10,000, you spend 6,500 to get it. Well, that's profit of $3,500. And the next month you go down a little bit with your revenue. So maybe you're making $9,000 in revenue. It only costs you $5,800 in cost of goods, and your net profit is a little bit down. But again, you're going to be able to realize some more of that profit because you had to spend less in cost of goods, right? So if I look at my QuickBooks on a lot of my e-commerce businesses, right, you'll see what happens is like it's a roller coaster of sales, but like one month my profit might be like super sky high because I'm able to take more money out of the business because the business isn't like scaling significantly. And then some months where the business gets more orders, the net profit is like very, very small compared to other months because I had to spend a lot more money to fund those orders and that revenue, right? And then for example, here with month three, $10,800, you had to spend a little bit more here. Obviously, this month right here, you're going to make a lot less because you had to spend a lot more, but that will be reflected in the next month, depending on if you stayed, pretty stagnant on your sales, if you went down, or if you, went back up. So I just wanted to touch on this because a lot of people won't necessarily realize this. Cash flow is the number one problem in an e-commerce business. It's the number one thing that you should have your focus on. And yes, you can make great money, but you might not necessarily realize that profit if your business is scaling and you're getting more orders because you're spending more on cost of goods, but that is a good thing.